All right, let's go crim 5. This is chapter 13, community relations in the context of culture. We've talked about a lot of this stuff. So this whole PowerPoint presentation is really self-explanatory, so there's going to be parts I'm going to say just read this because you don't need me to tell you a lot of this stuff. But we've talked about culture, we've talked about customs, we talked about traditions, we've talked about different ethnic groups having different ways of life. Okay, all right. United States is really very, very culturally diverse. I would say Fresno County, very, very, very culturally diverse. Yeah, I'm going to skip this. Context. Being culturally appropriate. What does that mean? And how can we all be culturally appropriate all the time? Let's say that there are people living in Fresno County from 100 different cultures. How on earth is a police officer expected to understand the traditions of each of those cultures? Tough, right? Oh, is that talking about? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. Xenophiles, blah, blah, blah. We have to be sensitive to the norms and traditions of others. Makes sense? Now, what kind of issues arise when, let's say, there's a country where a 20-year-old man is allowed to and encouraged to marry a 13-year-old girl? Should we, as Americans, allow that here because it's culturally accepted in the country they came from? Obviously, that's not going to happen. So there are lines that cannot be crossed. But so some people think that people should come to America and be expected to become American, and by that I mean adopt the American culture. Some people think that different cultures should complement each other within the American culture. Some say that differences are allowed to flourish, but there's no effort to embrace them or weave them into mainstream. And some say the host country should accommodate the people who come to it. All kinds of different thoughts. Understanding crime. We must understand the people in our community to understand the crime that happens. New immigrant communities and other communities need special police attention. I guess the tough part here is a lot of new immigrants to the United States don't necessarily trust the police. And oh yeah, that's kind of showed in this slide. A lot of new immigrants suffered abuses at the hands of the government where they came from. So when they come here to the United States, a lot of times they don't trust the police. Overcoming stereotypes. You all have these stereotypes of what you think of when you think of a certain person. Should you? No. So we need to overcome that. Yeah, there's all kinds of different stuff involved in culture. African American community, the term black can be misleading. And why is that? Because you do have, oh my gosh. Because there are Caribbean type of, I guess we would say, black people that live in the United States as well, so they're not necessarily African American. I don't know. Make sense? Okay. So, I don't know what is going on in my house behind me here. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. I think somebody's just dragging a chair or something from one room to another. But anyways, they're no longer the major minority within the United States. Hispanic Americans, they comprise the majority ethnic group within the United States now. Category is not by race, but by ethnic heritage. Mexican Americans, largest Hispanic group in the United States. You can read the rest of this. Puerto Ricans, second largest group in the United States. Although Puerto Rico is an American territory. Puerto Rico is really nice, by the way. I went there a couple years ago. Cuban Americans, a lot of Cuban Americans in Florida. This talks about some of their characteristics. Later, Cuban immigrants. I guess these are early. Initial, later. Asian Americans, highly diverse group. You can read all this. Chinese Americans. Filipino Americans. Have you guys watched that whole, 90 Day Fiancé, with Ed and Rose? Anyways, you can read this. Asian Indians, I believe that they're referring to people from actual India. Again, you can read that. Vietnamese Americans, Korean Americans, I guess I went a little bit too fast, but Japanese Americans, Native Americans, white Americans, European Americans, Irish Catholics, this was my family here, Jewish Americans, Middle Easterners and North Africans. Again, we just went through, 10 slides or so of all kinds of different ethnic groups. Each one has stereotypes attached to it. Each one has their own issues and challenges that they have to deal with. And again, police are responsible for dealing with everyone. Improving community relations in the context of culture. Appreciating culture, understanding language, getting involved in a meaningful way, affecting public policy, making a firm, full commitment, and overcoming barriers. These are things that people moving, new immigrants could do. And police agencies could also hire more people of different ethnicities in order to relate better to the community. Training is also something that's we've seen probably throughout this course is lacking with a lot of police agencies and learning how to deal with different people. While I'm still here, though, I do want to mention most recently with the coronavirus pandemic, the Asian American community has seen they have just been horrifically mistreated by people in the United States. And every time something happens, unfortunately, this type of hatred and bias and racism kicks in, and hopefully it will stop. But that is the end of chapter 13.